Guys and gals, ladies and gentlemen, dogs and felines of the world, it is time for another episode of Prepper Talk Radio with Scott, Shane, and Paris, aka John Wick over here. We're excited because we're going to be diving into history tonight. We're going to talk about George Washington's vision and prophecy about America. And you've probably heard us talk about this before, or at least Shane, and we've all gone, yeah. We wanted to dive into it tonight. So that's what we're going to do. But before we do, we want to make sure you check us out over at our website. It's really easy to find. It's preppertalkradio.com. We've got the coolest shirts, of which both my brethren here are repping, our Apocalyptimist and our Ready-Minded shirts. Guys, if you want to support the show, that's the way to go. We are all about God, family, and community. We want to help each other. That's why we do the podcast, but we could use your help. And you might as well look good doing it. So check out our shirts, check out our shop. Also check out our books listed. And there's my favorite one in there, which I just put back in the library. The Ready Radius by Shane and myself. And that's volume 1. We're leaving that open for future editions.
If we ever have time, that's the hard question. That's the hard question.
Now, go check that out. We got a lot of good stuff on the website. There's a lot of our recommended products and gear and some videos for you to check out. Now, if you want more one-on-one time, I guess you could say, or group time with us, make sure you join our Facebook group. It's linked off of our website. Just click on the little group button. It'll get you there. But go over to preppertalkradio.com. Now, on to, I feel like I need a flute and a marching drum and a soldier behind me.
What do you think of when you think of George Washington?
Right? Jumping into George Washington's vision and prophecy.
My drummer boy.
This is, I went through and I've read it a couple times, but this is like, what the heck? Because like in my experience, I haven't had an angel visit me. In my experience, I have never fought a war for my freedom. So there's not a whole lot that I can read this and go, I can really relate to that. But I can read it and go, holy crap. So first off, why do we think this was so pertinent for us to talk about on the podcast today?
Well, I think one thing I think of is real quick, Shane, sorry. No, is that it was the first president of the United States. I mean, we're a republic. It basically describes his vision. There's 3 parts that when you get into it, the angel apparently told him that the first part he was experiencing right then, and that we're in the middle of it. And the second part, they really feel like was closer to the Civil War time frame. And the third part of this dream is still to come. If that's the case, the third part in the dream, the warning was that was the worst of all 3 of them. And so if George Washington's section was the first and the Civil War was the second and the third is worse, we're headed into some stuff, that's legit. And I think preparing for that is super important.
Yeah. And what I wanted to kind of bring up first is, just who George Washington was. I mean, he was a very young man when he became a commander-in-chief, when he was a general in the army in his 20s. I think it was 23 when he's a commander-in-chief. But he was a big guy. He's like 6'4", 225.
Wow.
Really handsome guy.
So he was Clark Kent.
Yeah, probably like Clark Kent, but without the glasses, and just a very...
They didn't have glasses back then. They were spectacles.
Spectacles, excuse me. Okay. I don't know. You think I should know since I'm the one who looks back to prepare for the future, right? But just thinking about how, and we've seen the portraits, the drawings of George Washington kneeling and praying, and those are true stories. I mean, those are absolutely true. They're not fabricated, made up, or anything. And he was really a God-fearing man. He was very religious, very spiritual, always found praying. He was, the stories of, Valley Forge in the winter. We've heard that. We're probably taught that in elementary school, the crossing of the Delaware, right, with George Washington and his men, 1,000 men who were untrained, and he had to train them in his, actually, I think he was probably in his 30s by the time of the Revolutionary War. But he was a strong, I guess you could say, a mighty man. I like that phrase. And some people even would say he was the greatest man to ever live on the North American continent. I think I would disagree with that slightly, but as for an American, yeah, I probably would agree with that.
At least one of the greatest men.
Yeah, absolutely. And when he was president, he didn't seek for re-election. He did not really aspire to that. He was the people wanted him to be the president, and that's why he took the position and then walked away from it as soon as he was done. But he was just a really great man, moral, ethical man. And and the words I've heard to describe him, he's kind, he's courteous, of course seems like very saintly, right? I wish I would know the man. Maybe I will someday, right? Mm-hmm. But I wanted to kind of set the stage with why I wanted to talk a little bit about his vision, and there's a lot more to it as well. But if anybody deserved or merited to receive a vision or a visitation or whatever you want to call it, George Washington in his day was as good as man as they get, in my opinion.
Well, what's interesting too is like we talk about our founding fathers, but George Washington has his own title as the father of our country, right? Because he was the first president once we became the United States of America, right? But prior to that, there was, I think, 6 or 7 other presidents, but they were the presidents of the colonies, the United Colonies, right? But I've been to Mount Vernon, I've been back east, and I've been to some of the sites, and I'll tell you this: Mount Vernon is a special place.
That's cool.
Walking around those grounds, it is a little bit reminiscent of a holy place. Some other holy grounds that I've walked on. We only hear and see and read what we have available to us from what history was collected. But there's definitely enough evidence that I would 100% agree that George Washington was a good, moral, God-fearing man. Right. We do know that he was a Mason. We do know that he was the president of the United States. He was a commander in chief, that he was a general, right? That he had his spies in the military, which had some of the coolest, most epic tales. My in-laws, one of his spies was one of my in-laws' relatives. So they've got, we've got stories of this guy, and we've got this of that guy. And then there's even a TV show about it years ago. And they're like, we've got to watch the show. And then it turned out to be a little too mature rated for them. And they're like, we're done. I'm like, dude, it's spy stuff. People dying. Like, you got to be, yeah. There's so much about history that we don't get to see firsthand. We never will. But when the stories line up, that tells us where the truth is. When enough of the witnesses of history are saying the same thing, you got to pay attention. And that's why I'm like so interested in this. Mad respect for President Washington, mad respect for his life, especially his faith. But reading through the vision the last few times, I'm kind of like, holy crap. I thought the third one would be like the World War I or II. It's not even remotely those. And those were worse, right? Those are worse than the Civil War. Like, what the heck? So let's kind of jump to the vision, and let's kind of go through the 3 experiences. It all started with an angel appearing to him, and I thought it was in a tent, but it says in an apartment or maybe compartment. So
right,
I'm not
like
fully
his
sure.
Dwelling, whatever it was at the time, a tent or
yeah. But it was during his time, I believe, at Valley Forge, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it was during the winter time of Valley Forge when he had just received a report about some of the things that were going on with his soldiers, and he was just really in a place of just compassion and charity, and just wanting to really know what is going on. Like how do we do this, and how do we win if I'm sure that these people knew that they were fighting for something that was worthwhile, and it was And I'm sure they had very strong spiritual impressions that they were doing what was right, just, true, and all of those great words and virtues. And so to be able to have those feelings and then feel like all the world and frankly hell is against you, you're almost, it's the one place I would go is to God and say, hey, help me out, help me understand what's going on here, because we feel like we're doing the right thing. And you promised in the Bible, it talks about the promises of the Lord. If you do what I've asked you to do, I'll prosper you, and you'll get the blessings of heaven upon you. And so the idea was that he was in a place where he was humble enough to receive a fantastic message. And how it really, I believe, how it really relates to prepping is that it really confirms that we're headed into something that's bigger. You know, we all talk about and have heard talk about World War III. We've all heard talk about invasions from other countries. We've all talked about, lately there's invasions, cyber invasions, and all kinds of things from China and Russia and other places. And if you think about it, I mean, it says here in the dream, it says the Asian, European, and African countries kind of there's this how it shows the kind of they come onto the American people. That's exactly what we're seeing right now. Like in my opinion, as I'm looking around, I'm like, I don't know about Africa so much, but definitely the Saudi Arabia, which is, you know what I mean? That's in the African continent, I think, or close enough.
So check this out. So we have this record because of, I think, Anthony. Let's see. Anthony Sherman got it firsthand, and he shared it, and also Wesley Bradshaw got it firsthand. And Wesley Bradshaw's report is the one that we're listening to, or we're reading from. If you guys want to check it out, if you go to sign.org/articles, or just type in George Washington's Vision and Prophecy, we'll tag it in the notes in the podcast, but it's on sign.org, and it's phenomenal. Like I'm going to read a segment of it just so you can understand the language, because we don't write like this anymore. We don't think like this anymore. Like there's more effort put into the thought process of what was said back then than what we give today. So let me read this. It's quite phenomenal. The first-hand account of this vision was given in 1859, and then shared a couple of times later. But here's where it gets interesting. It was 1880 that it is the first time it got put into print in the National Tribune, which is now called the Stars and Stripes. So here's what Wesley Bradshaw said. Let us go into the hall, he said. I want to tell you of an incident of Washington's life, one which no one alive knows of except myself. I mean, he was like 99 years old at the time. And if you live, you will before long see it verified. Mark the prediction. You will see it verified. From the opening of the revolution, we experienced all phases of fortune, now good and now ill, one time victorious and another conquered. The darkest period that we had, I think, was when Washington, after several reverses, retreated to Valley Forge, where he resolved to pass the winter of 1777. Like, what a way to start. Like, he just like sets the stage, and like we know it was horrible. He says, I've often seen the tears coursing down our dear commander's careworn cheeks as he would be conversing with a confidential officer about the condition of his poor soldiers. You have doubtless heard the stories of Washington's going to the thicket to pray. Well, it was not only true, but he used often to pray in secret for aid and comfort, and God brought us safely through the darkest days of tribulation. Like, and it goes on to where it starts is an angel appears to George Washington. He's chilling in his quarters, and every time I've ever heard of an angel showing up, people are like, "What?" Like, that's why most of the time you hear in the scriptures they're like, "Fear not, I bring you good tidings." They're like, "Oh, we're all gonna die," right? That's like it's not a oh, hey, look, an angel. It's like, whoa, like life-changing, everything's about to go what? Right? And an angel appears.
Well, it was funny because he was almost upset because he told his soldiers, "Don't let anybody disrupt me. I'm I'm busy contemplating. And then all of a sudden he looks up and he sees this, being there. And he's like, what are you doing here? Wait a minute. That's not a normal person. Wait a minute. What am I? And then all of a sudden it starts to, anyways, keep reading it. I didn't want to ruin it, but I just thought that was funny.
So this being shows up and he's so astonished, for I had given strict orders not to be disturbed, that it was some moments before I found language to inquire the cause of the visit, her presence. It was a woman angel. A second, a third, even a fourth time did I repeat my question, but received no answer from my mysterious visitor, except a slight raising of her eyes. By this time, I felt strange sensations spreading through me. I would have risen, but the riveted gaze of the being before me rendered volition impossible. I essayed once more to speak, but my tongue had become useless, as if paralyzed. A new influence, mysterious, potent, irresistible, took possession of me. All I could do was to gaze steadily, vacantly, at my own unknown visitor. Gradually, the surrounding atmosphere seemed to fill with sensations and grew luminous. Everything about me seemed to rarefy. The mysterious visitor herself also becoming more airy and yet more distinct to my sight than before. I began to feel as one dying, or rather, experience the sensations which I have sometimes imagined accompanied death. I did not think, I did not reason, I did not move. All were alike impossible. I was only conscious of gazing fixedly, vacantly at my companion. Presently I heard a voice saying, "Son of the Republic, look and learn." At which time his visitor extended her arm eastward. I now beheld a heavy white vapor at some distance, rising fold upon fold. This gradually dissipated, and I looked upon a strange scene. Before me lay, spread out on this vast plain, all the countries of the world: Europe, Asia, Africa, and America. I saw rolling and tossing between Europe and America the billows of the Atlantic, and between Asia and America lay the Pacific. "Son of the Republic," said the same mysterious voice as before, "look and learn." And she jumps into the first vision. We're not going to read the whole thing. You guys have to go read the whole thing. I just want you to get the lay of how he rehearses this and how pertinently, fixedly these words stayed with Wesley his whole life.
Mm-hmm.
This is deeply, deeply unique.
I love that. Son of the Republic. Look and learn.
I was going to say, we need to be our next shirt, Son of the Republic, right?
Yeah.
Maybe that's assuming too much, right? But and then maybe small print, look and learn, something like that, right? Keep your eyes open, watch, and then
those who have eyes to see will see, right?
Yeah.
We need to have eyes to see that we can see.
And learn. Figure out what the heck I'm showing you here, right? Learn. I'm teaching you. In other words, I'm teaching you something here, right?
Mm-hmm. What's interesting is she goes and says, "Okay, look, pay attention. This is important. George, pay attention. Here it comes," and shows him the Revolutionary War, what he's currently in, the great peril of that. But that out of that would become the freedom, the liberty, what would be the United States, the new republic, if we could keep it. And then she says it again, "Son of the Republic, look and learn," and showed him the second great peril, which would be the Civil War. Now, at the time this was shared, it was pre-Civil War, right? So everyone's like, what's this going to be all about? And he showed the whole spectacle of it. There was a union, that there were two flags, the divided nation, and the inhabitants casting down their weapons and eventually becoming friends after the war, right? The North and the South reconciling, and it ends happily, right? But it was horrid to watch. And then she repeats herself a third time. "Son of the Republic, look and learn." Now, Do I need to read this for a little bit?
I think at least reading the third one would be good, because
Okay.
it will tell us kind of what we're headed into. Because this is the one that supposedly hasn't happened. I totally, as I read it, I'm like, yeah, that's not happened yet. And so I think that's what we are in. That's how it helps as a prepper. If George Washington saw this, what's crazy about it is George Washington saw it. He literally experienced the first one, and we know it. The second one, and we know it. So 2 out of the 3 have come to fruition, and we have history. We can look back and we can see that the prophecy, quote unquote, which I believe is real, has come true. It came true. The first 2 came true. Why wouldn't we believe the third one is going to follow behind it? And so the third one tells us about what's coming. And that's super important for us to recognize, because it's all stuff that, what's crazy about it is all stuff that we kind of been, other people, other things we've all talked about and prepared for and thought about. Every one of the books that you read about 1 second after, about how society collapses after the EMP or whatever earthquake happens, and just like the movies that have come out recently, it all coincides with a very similar description. It describes pretty much similar things. I mean, even Red Dawn, for goodness sakes, literally to me, Red Dawn is kind of like, hey,
well, yeah, that's what I wanted to talk about after this. Is there are so many other witnesses, and not just like you say, Red Dawn or movies, but other, we'll call them prophets of our day. It's all over YouTube. You can go and look up and just do a simple search and find people with vision. And we'll get into this later, but this is super interesting. But yeah.
Okay.
It all comes together.
I'll read through the rest of this, then we'll continue on in what will be an exciting dialogue. So the angel, again, son of the Republic, look and learn. At this, the dark, shadowy angel placed a trumpet to his mouth and blew 3 distinct blasts. This angel talking about another angel and showing the vision in the other angel. Let me correct that. So he saw another angel blowing 3 distinct blasts and taking water from the ocean. He sprinkled it upon Europe, Asia, and Africa. Then my eyes beheld a fearful scene. From each of these continents arose thick black clouds that were soon joined into one. And through this mass there gleamed a dark red light by which I saw hordes of armed men. These men, moving with the cloud, marched by land and sailed by sea to America, which country was enveloped in the volume of the cloud. And I dimly saw these vast armies devastate the whole country, and the villages, towns, and cities which I had seen springing up. As my ears listened to the thunderings of the cannons, clashing of the swords, and shouts and cries of millions in mortal combat, I again heard the mysterious voice saying, "Son of the Republic, look and learn." Where the voice had ceased, the dark, shadowy angel placed his trumpet once more to his mouth and blew a long, fearful blast. Instantly, a light of 1,000 suns shone from above me and pierced and broke into fragments the dark clouds which enveloped America. At the same moment, the angel upon whose head still shone the word Union, and who bore our national flag in one hand and a sword in the other, descended from the heavens, attended by legions of white spirits. These immediately joined the inhabitants of America, who I perceived were well nigh overcome, but who immediately, taking courage again, closed up their broken ranks and renewed the battle. Amid the fearful noise of the conflict, I heard the mysterious voice saying, "Son of the Republic, look and learn." As the voice ceased, the shadowy angel fell for the last time, dipped water from the ocean, and sprinkled it upon America. Instantly, the dark clouds rolled back, together with the armies it had brought, leaving the inhabitants and the land victorious. Then, once more, I beheld the villages, towns, and cities springing up where I had seen them before, while the bright angel planted the azure standard he had brought in the midst of them, cried with a loud voice, while the stars remain and the heavens send down dew upon the earth, so long shall the Union last. And taking from his brow the crown which was emblazoned the word Union, He placed it upon the standard, while the people kneeling down said, Amen.
That's crazy. I mean, so you can see, as what I was sharing earlier, is that these soldiers that come in, it says they devastate the whole country and the villages, towns, and cities which I had seen springing up. I mean, when you read the first and second, we didn't read the first and second vision, but you'll see in those, when you read it, you'll see in those first and second visions how it kind of relates to what he kind of wraps up that thought with that line there. And then as it's kind of that idea is that God is all throughout the Bible, you see that God's like they call it a fourth watch God. Like you think it's like the last minute. Like think of Jonah. Like he's in the whale. He's like praying, save me. And then the last minute, God's like, yeah, I'm going to teach you a lesson. But then he saves him. And there's several different stories all throughout the scriptures in the Bible, especially that talk about this he saves us right at the last minute. And this is kind of the same thing. So it coincides, in my opinion, with biblical truths as well. Because I mean, the people are literally, they're broken ranks. They feel like they're about to lose. They're like, everything's been destroyed. We're never going to win. And all of a sudden, heaven opens up and something, however that plays out in real life, there's going to be this amazing power from God in the heavens that are come in, and they're going to immediately take courage again. They're going to close up their broken ranks. They're going to renew to the battle, and they're going to go on and take over and win, and the Union wins. Yeah. And I just love that. I just, it's the typical hero arc, of any, superhero movie you think about. And it's based in truth, and it's coming from a man who we all can respect. Like George, you can't, I mean, you say what you want about certain people in our life today in certain churches and religions, but I think we all have a level of respect for George Washington and what he did and the kind of man he was and the integrity that he had, that if he came up with this or he shared this, it wouldn't be some fake weird thing. It would be a legit story that would be real, and it would be something that we could take to the bank, especially since the first two have already come true. So if the third one is true, where we have these armies, and it says the angel scooped up in the ocean and poured over Asia, Europe, and Africa. Have you guys think about the BRICS nations, right? Like some of those nations are in those various places, right? So it's just an amazingly powerful. I feel like that right now that there's probably several phases to this. One, of course, is the hot cold war, as they say, and then at some point it really does seem to be, if the first two had a hot section or a kinetic section, it seems to me that at some point this is going to turn into a kinetic opportunity or situation as well. So the preparation for not just food, but also to have protection. And this is a battle. It talks about having a battle here, and that means we need to be in good shape physically and good health to be able to fight and continue on and go for it. So just a lot of things in here that are very prepper related, in my humble opinion.
Yeah, I think a few things I wanted to point out is we know that maybe for ourselves, and maybe looking at others, visions or dreams that we can talk about, is people are shown things through the spirit and dreams and visions in a way they can understand it for themselves. Right. And George Washington is writing this, describing it as the way he understood it in words that, in descriptions that he can understand, that he can describe. Because I know a lot of times, or sometimes when I see something, like, I know what I felt, my impressions were, but I couldn't necessarily describe them in words, right? So there may be some interpretation to some of these things. Okay, what exactly did he mean by this or that? Like for example, what were the three blasts, the three distinct blasts? What was that, and what does that represent? And then also the dark red light. What is that? And what does that represent? And did he actually see a red light? Or, a lot of these could be just impressions and feelings, right? Rather than something visually he saw. I know that's how it works sometimes. But and thinking about the dark red, what are the colors for communism? It's red, right?
Yeah.
And there's Russia and there's China, and that goes along with some other visions that we could talk about as well. It's like where that is the Communist Manifesto. I mean, again, I don't want to get too deep and into those types of things. I don't know we would have enough time, or I have that information in front of me to share it accurately. But I think it's important to try to understand the time. 1777. That's a lot of sevens. First of all, seven's an important number, right?
Mm-hmm.
And just the situation he was in at the time in Valley Forge in the winter, a lot of suffering, and just his mindset he would be in at the time, and the day and age, very different.
Mm-hmm.
So a lot of things that, especially when like you're reading the scriptures, I read it and I don't understand a darn thing unless you understand some history, unless you understand some background, you understand the people, the way they live, their way of life, the way they spoke, those types of things. And so I think that all applies here a little bit as well.
Well, definitely context adjusts how we see so many different things, right? Mm-hmm. So the red is significant. The fact that at the end, so there's the 3 distinct blasts, which is symbolic also in the Hebrew culture. Think of the ram's horn being blown, right?
So far.
And then there's the long blast at the end. There's also at the conclusion of it all, like right before the end of it, it's like we're losing. And the reason why this isn't any of the prior world wars is because those all happened everywhere else. This is happening here in America.
Yeah.
So search in your heart and pray about this to find out if this is true and seek a witness from God. But I tend to believe it because it lines up with so many other prophecies. And here's the other thing is we're promised that there will be heavenly help to give us freedom. But what's interesting is the flag changes. The stars and stripes are tossed, and what is it replaced with? A azure flag. That bright sky blue, one of the 7 colors of the rainbow. It also has significant ties to peace and heavenly unity. So it's like that peace, tranquility, that calmness, that serenity. Like those who will survive those dark days will recognize that it was God's intervention that got them through it. Right? All the more reason, do everything you can, prep like everything depends on you, and then pray like everything depends on God.
Yep.
But that to me was like so deeply significant. I'm like, we need to get better prepared spiritually and physically. Physically for me, that's like the biggest one, right? I'm trying to lose weight. I'm trying to get there. I'm 2 years and a month away from being able to kick and stretch and kick and say I'm 50. So I got to be able to get to that point so I can.
It's only downhill from there, brother. So better get it done fast.
I got to get myself to my midlife, physique, because I'm planning to live 100 years. I got to get that there. I got 2 years to get there. So
because you got to get lean while you can, because after 50, it's going to be twice as hard. One thing that as the guy says here, then these men moving with the cloud marched by land and sailed by sea to America, which country was enveloped in the volume of cloud. I just saw the 10 million people that have invaded our country over the last several years. That was something that kind of reminded me of that. Now, is this third? Is that the fulfillment of this prophecy of the third? I don't know, but it definitely came to my mind as I was like, man, when we just had an invasion, so to speak, there still might be more coming, but at this point,
can I stack a layer to that for you?
Yeah, do it.
So darkness is typically representation, like a dark cloud is confusion, disarray, spiritual darkness, right? Lack of faith. What's been happening to our society? Moral decay, intentional moral decay, right? We're already in that cloud of darkness. And during that cloud of darkness, then what happens? The armies, the soldiers, and the sailors come across. They're hidden by that darkness.
They are. And what's interesting is that we can't see them coming to prepare or to fight them off before they get there. They literally arrive and do their damage because America was in this cloud of confusion, funk, whatever you want to call it. And that's so good, dude. That was a legit insight.
Here's another thought. What is the color of the UN helmet? Right?
Blue.
Sky blue. Not quite azure, but close.
Not quite. Yeah. But that's just the thought just came to me. Like, I don't want to go down that rabbit hole. That would take us down a completely different track. But
there are a lot of NDEs, and I know a lot of people out there have been sharing NDEs, which is near-death experiences.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of near-death experiences describe scenes that are similar to this. And I think that's what we were talking about earlier, is some of the things that, like you said, Shane, go on YouTube, type in near-death experiences about wars and invasions.
Just last days. Yeah.
Last days. You'll see not every NDE has something like this in it, but there's enough of them that it's like, wait a minute, we got to pay attention here.
Well, like I say, there are a lot of individual personal experiences, and I will say they are personal. They're meant for that person, not necessarily for me or for you, but we take from them what we feel applies, right? I mean, what we're inspired to, but it doesn't necessarily apply. Like there's a book called Visions of Glory, Spencer, and it would match this description quite closely, right? I mean, and I'm sure he was familiar with this dream, right? That Spencer individual.
Maybe not.
I mean, who knows? Yeah, but there are so many others as well. I mean, you look at the Book of Revelations. It coincides, and well as Daniel and Matthew.
The Book of Revelation talks about the horns being the blowing of the horns and the trumpets, and so why that totally coincides with that.
And I'm sure George Washington knew the Book of Revelations and was very familiar with that, right? But and there are, like I say, you get on YouTube and search visions and the last days, and you'll see a lot of different stories. And one in particular, I don't know if you want to really get into it, but since I was a kid, my dad gave me this book. Oh, see if you can see it here. Okay, Spiritual Survival in the Last Days. This is these are LDS authors. And it talks about former LDS presidents, prophets, and so forth that describe very similar visions and dreams, just more corroboration. And we can get more into that in detail. But and I know that doesn't necessarily apply to a lot of people. They won't necessarily believe those types of things because they come from different sources and so forth. But it's just more witnesses in my mind, regardless which faith it's from, because I've seen evangelists and talk about similar events, and whether they're Mormons or others, they have very similar experiences, and that all corroborate George Washington's vision, his dream, call it a dream, vision, whatever.
Yeah. Well, I mean, even Jonathan Cahn, who's that Jewish Messianic Jew, a lot of his teachings, when he speaks about what's happening, and he talks about the Shemitah and some of these other things, it's very in this same vein of things. And he talks about maybe there's a new book since, but the most recent book I remember is the one that talks about the year of the dragon or something like that. And it's just talking about a lot of the things that are in the Bible, the book of Revelations. And honestly, as preppers, we talk about preparing, anything from job loss to the zombie apocalypse and the end of the world. And, preppers, we can focus in on job loss and food storage and helping and natural disasters. And one of the things it talks about in Matthew 24 is that there will be more natural disasters as time goes on too, and more of the weird weather patterns and weird weather seasonings and stuff like that happening. So, as a prepper, to dismiss these things from Scripture I think is an error, because they're so corroborative of what we believe is going to happen potentially. Why are we preparing in the first place? What inspirations, what things inspire us? Usually it's heavenly, good, godly things that inspire us and motivate us. And so that's where I started my whole journey as I was reading through the book of Revelation, the book of Matthew, and some of these other scriptures, and that book, Visions of Glory, that you mentioned, Shane. I read through that and I was like, you know what? I need to get ready. I need to get prepared. Like this vision is so just in line. It's so in alignment with these other places. I'm just like, absolutely, I believe it 100%. I believe that, what is the interpretation? Well, there's a section that goes into the interpretation after this is over. And like you said, Shane, I really love that you said that, because every dream, vision that people have is typically designed for that person to seek greater light and knowledge and wisdom in the interpreting of it. However, there are people that have gifts of interpretation that can help and guide and direct and provide insights. And I've had dreams and visions and shared them with you guys, and you've given me insights and vice versa. And I think that we've come to some really amazing things over the years as our friendship. I mean, stuff we've even talked, some stuff we've never even talked about on the podcast, but just in our friendship and our own spiritual journey. And so it's just really been I think it was a good idea, Shane, to bring up this vision and dream. And thank you for recommending it, because it was cool to read it all the way through.
And I think that for me, the most important reason is we need to be a warning voice. I don't want to be the one who's always, the apocalyptimist, right? I'm looking forward to these events, and I believe they're coming. And if we don't raise a warning voice, then what good are we, honestly? I mean, if we've been warned, it's our duty to warn our neighbor. And there are some pretty difficult things coming. And a lot of people have the attitude to say, well, you know what, if I die, I die. Oh, okay. If that's your attitude, great. That's fine. That's up to you. That's your decision. For me, my goal is to survive and get through the difficult times, because it's going to make me a better, stronger person. Right. And that's really kind of the goal. Is I don't want to be raptured, because then I won't necessarily be pushed to my limits to understand who I am and what blessings I can receive in my trials. And so that's why I'm very positive about what's coming, even though I know it'll probably be the most difficult thing I've ever experienced. And honestly, hopefully I do get to experience it. Hopefully I'm still here.
Well, the book of Revelation actually asks, there's a section in, I can't remember, I think it's Revelation 17. I don't quote me on that. I will look, if you want to know, I'll look it up, because I know it's in there, where it talks about these two people are talking, and they're like, hey, what is this guys who have these things on their forehead? What's that all about?
Mm-hmm.
And the guy literally says, it's those who have come through the tribulations that are given these greater blessings. And to me, that's like, well, I don't want to be raptured either. I want to come through them so I can have the greater blessings, right? So the reality is that the book of Revelations talks very deeply about some of these things and how they exactly the things that we're talking about here and what we need to be prepared for. And I just going through the tribulations and purifying the refiner's fire is a real thing. And if I trust God well enough as a master blacksmith, he's not going to keep me in the fires too long so that I burn. And he's not going to keep me in the fire too short that I don't actually set and get pure. He's going to keep me in the fire exactly as I need it to purify me and help me be pure so that I'm ready for whatever's to come. And I believe that there's a lot of real good wisdom in this dream and this vision, and it really coincides with the scriptures. And so I believe it's true. Yeah. And we need to prepare like it is.
Yep. Yeah. Time to get ready is now, as we never know what's going to happen next. I mean, especially with everything that's going on in the world, right? It looks terrible one day, and then the next day it's switched completely, and we're back up. Markets are up again, and it's down, and it's up again. And I think people tend, at least I do sometimes, like, oh, everything switched. We're back to normal. I'm using the air quotes, normal. Back to normal again. And then the next week it's completely different, and we don't know what's going on behind the scenes. We're not told everything what's going on out there, and I think the right approach is to prepare as if tomorrow's is the day of the collapse of this vision to happen, right? Of these visions to happen. And so that's my attitude. And maybe that's a little pessimistic. Maybe that's a little self, I don't know, just a bad or difficult view of the future, right? A very negative view of the future. But again, I do it very positively, but try to work every single day that this is my last day to prepare.
Made me think of that song, "Sunshines and Lollipops," and right.
To each his own, there, Scott.
Right? The reality is, we live in the cloud now. We're in the darkness. We're being directed in so many different ways at so many different times, with fear, with excitement, with overload of adrenaline. Like we're being intentionally kept in a state of almost fight or flight in our world, right? So you've got to find foundational things that will keep you grounded and keep you focused and keep you centered on God, family, and country and community. And here the end of the day is this: we know things are going to get worse before it gets better, and that's okay. We came here at this time in this world for that experience. And when it comes to preparedness, this is what I'll leave you on. I would rather be ready 10 years too early than 10 minutes too late.
Yeah, amen to that.
Thank you, everyone who's tuned in today and listened to the episode. Remember to share this with everyone you know. You never know which one of our podcasts are going to pop off on the charts and just go nuts. So whatever one resonates with you, share that with your friends. Help them get better prepared. Be the warning voice, the ready voice that they need in their lives. I want to thank you for listening and being part of the Ready family here over at Prepper Talk Radio. We do this because we felt this needed to be done. We feel like there needs to be a Christian-centered voice in the world of prep that focuses on faith instead of fear, hope and preparation over despair and desperation. Guys, thanks for tuning in and not tuning out. Thanks for being part of the family, and we'll catch you on the next episode.
See you next week.
Take care, guys.